Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into the incredibly high-stakes world of global industrial project integration. We're talking about those massive infrastructure, mining, and energy megaprojects, the ones that cross borders and literally inject billions of dollars into local economies. But here's the catch. Despite all that money, these projects routinely hit a massive brick wall. We call this the expansion friction point.
So that brings us to the ultimate question. How exactly do you turn local compliance from a frustrating legal hurdle into an absolute competitive advantage? Why do these massive global projects face such immediate local resistance, even when they're bringing huge economic promises? Well, simply bringing jobs just isn't cutting it anymore. With the upcoming 2026 ESG mandates now directly linking project financing to how well you integrate with the local community, it's a whole new ballgame. Data from the World Bank and IFC makes one thing crystal clear. Without genuine local integration, your project is fundamentally at risk, both financially and socially, from day one.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for navigating this. First, we'll look at the expansion friction point. 2, the statutory compliance blueprint. 3, the documentation audit trail. 4, strategic recruitment protocols. And finally, number 5, future-proofing local partnerships. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The expansion friction point. Understanding the social risk.
At the very bedrock of all this integration is something called the Social License to Operate, or the SLO. Now, based on Hogan-Lovells' legal framework, this isn't some certificate you just print out and hang on the wall. It comes purely from direct, meaningful engagement with the communities themselves. It's about securing real recognition that your business enterprise is actually mutually beneficial. Look, your legal team can get you the official concessions and permits to legally operate, sure, but it's this social license that actually stops the costly protests and minimizes conflict. It's absolutely crucial for building resilient infrastructure and inclusive industrialization. Without community acceptance, well, you're just an outside force pushing your weight around, rather than being an actual partner.
And that means your daily, on-the-ground operations require really deep, continuous community integration. Obviously, government policy and regulations form the baseline, but out in the field, it's the human element that literally dictates your success. Think about it. When a local supplier or worker looks at your operation, they need to see transparent, clear opportunities. That's how we bridge the gap between abstract, high-level social theory and the very real legal frameworks companies actually have to satisfy.
Moving on to Section 2, the statutory compliance blueprint, navigating local frameworks.
So, how do governments actually shape this local participation? Well, the International Finance Corporation highlights 2 primary strategies. On one hand, you have mandatory requirements. These are the strict labor laws that dictate a very specific percentage of local workforce participation. Basically, what you absolutely must do just to keep the lights on. On the other hand, you have incentives. This is where advantages for using local content are baked directly into the tender evaluation criteria. It's designed to encourage joint ventures, incorporate local workforce policies, and even unbundle those massive contracts so smaller local firms can actually get a piece of the pie and compete. Both strategies force integration, but they require totally different management approaches.
Let's look at a real-world example. Ghana's 2006 Minerals and Mining Act, which was documented by the World Bank. The statutory requirements here are incredibly specific. We're talking strict preference for local materials and priority given specifically to citizen-owned service agencies. On top of that, you've got transparency requirements that mandate the public disclosure of your hiring and procurement pipelines. There are mandatory minimum proportions for local staff across all sorts of employment categories. In fact, their Minerals Commission actively works with companies to pinpoint foreign-held positions that can, eventually, be phased out and replaced by local talent. It's a very hands-on approach.
All right, Section 3, the documentation audit trail, vendor onboarding execution.
So how do we turn all these abstract requirements into rigorous administrative processes? Let's break down a massive corporate process into concrete steps using Shell's vendor onboarding flow as our model. Step 1. Suppliers have to submit their core financial and tax info. Basic stuff. Step 2 is a really rigorous ethics and compliance review. This focuses heavily on essential environmental and safety credentials, right alongside anti-bribery policies. Step 3 is independent data validation through a system like Achilles, which takes about 10 working days. And by the way, this is exactly where the digitization of procurement, like using blockchain-verified credentials, is rapidly becoming the industry standard. Finally, Step 4 grants that validated vendor a solid 3-year window of procurement visibility.
I know that documentation audit trail sounds incredibly heavy, but standardizing it is an absolute game changer. Procurement opportunities are actually at their strongest when your approval cycles are long, but your evidence requirements are highly standardized. When a company can just pre-package all that evidence, the security documentation, the verified compliance attestations, their financial turnover, it saves an immense amount of time. If you can solve this administrative puzzle once, you completely remove the friction from your local supply chain and lock in ongoing value for your vendors.
Let's transition to Section 4, Strategic Recruitment Protocols, Multiplying Local Impact.
I want you to think about the number 28 for a second. In some truly fascinating data-driven research, the World Bank studied the socio-economic impact of Newmont Ghana Gold Limited, and what they found was staggering. Just one single direct job at the mine created a massive multiplier effect of 28 induced jobs in the local economy. 28! Because those local suppliers respend their money, they pay wages, and they buy local inputs. Literally, one strategic hire ends up creating an entire thriving ecosystem.
But here's the thing, pure job volume isn't the final endgame. As the World Bank rightly points out, higher productivity activities need to develop alongside or in replacement of low productivity, high employment activities. Basically, you can't just hire thousands of people to do basic manual labor and call it a day. You've got to implement tiered hiring structures. Prioritize local talent for those entry-level roles, sure, but strategically close those technical skill gaps so you can move them into high-value positions over time.
Following guidelines from organizations like UNOPS, companies have to actively step up and develop the capacities of local vendors so they can meet strict international standards for health, safety, and quality. A lot of times, this means leaning heavily on local community liaisons to properly vet candidates and ensure you have authentic regional representation. It's all about taking a local supplier who maybe lacks the scale or capital right now, linking them up with local training institutions, and systematically turning them into a world-class, verifiable vendor for the long haul.
And that brings us to Section 5, Future-Proofing Local Partnerships, Sustainable Capacity Building.
Let's look at what this successful implementation actually looks like out in the real world. Back in 2015, Saipem achieved a workforce breakdown of 56% local employees versus 44% non-local. They literally flipped the script. By deeply integrating with the community, they managed to rely primarily on local talent, and you better believe this directly contributed to local economic growth while significantly slashing the reliance on expensive expatriate workers.
But the best part? They didn't stop at just general employment. In that same year, local managers made up 20% of the team, but Saipem set a long-term strategic goal to exceed 75% local management. This is the perfect illustration of transitioning to those high-productivity activities we were just talking about. To do this, you have to develop really robust professional development pipelines. That's how you turn local labor into long-term industrial assets, ensuring that one day they actually have the capacity to run the entire operation themselves.
So, when you deeply integrate local content, you unlock this incredibly powerful dual benefit. On the operational side, you get an enhanced learning curve, dramatically reduce expatriate costs, and way lower overall project risk. And on the community side, you build genuine mutual trust, facilitate real knowledge transfer, ensure social stability, and drive serious local economic growth. By establishing continuous monitoring systems to track this social impact throughout the entire project lifecycle, you perfectly balance those strict procurement mandates with enduring, rock-solid community trust.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If securing the social license is genuinely the true foundation of your project's future, if it is literally the only way to avoid the expansion friction point, how are you going to redesign your next procurement audit? Is it just going to be another mundane compliance checklist, or will you transform it into your ultimate tool for community integration and competitive advantage? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really encourage you to take these frameworks straight back to your own operations.